few abstracts I'll review deal with maintenance therapy, which is a relatively new, though now relatively established paradigm in the treatment of stage 4 non-small cell lung cancer. So to briefly overview, when we used to give chemotherapy in a traditional fashion for stage 4 metastatic disease, we would give 4 to 6 cycles of first-line combination chemotherapy. And for patients who at that point did not have disease progression, we gave them a break and we monitored them off treatment, usually seeing them in clinic and getting CAT scans every 2 months or so. Once we saw cancer progression, we then started them on second-line chemotherapy, which is usually single agent or one drug. Now, with maintenance chemotherapy, when you get to this same point of having finished 4 to 6 cycles of combination chemotherapy, you don't give the patient a break, and you immediately move into a subsequent therapy. Now, that treatment can be a component of the chemotherapy that was given initially, or it can be a new treatment altogether. But in general, this is a less intensive regimen. So if you started with 3 drugs, this might become 2 drugs. If you started with 2 drugs, this might become 1 drug. I think this treatment paradigm raises several important questions. One is, what is the meaning of disease progression as an endpoint in our clinical research? Because universally, when you're giving maintenance chemotherapy, you're going to delay progression compared to not doing anything. But the real question is, what are you doing for overall survival? Also, what does it mean to eliminate really the only treatment-free interval during therapy for patients with advanced non-small cell lung cancer? Now, I will admit that on average, this period off treatment was usually a little under 4 months, but for about 10% of people, it can be close to a year. And for that reason, I think it's important to start looking at who might benefit most from using a maintenance approach. We also need to think about toxicities and costs, because the cost and toxicity is always going to be more when you're giving therapy compared to not giving therapy. And it's very important to know how patients feel about this change. And that was the focus of my publication in Patient Education and Counseling last year, where this figure comes from. But what these upcoming abstracts really focus on is which maintenance regimen should we use. So the first few abstracts focus on the Point Break study, which was conducted by Jyoti Patel and her colleagues. And this trial enrolled almost 1,000 patients with advanced non-small cell lung cancer. And it looked at 2 questions, because not only was the maintenance therapy different, but their first-line or induction therapy was different. So half of the patients received the chemo drugs pemetrexed, carboplatin, and then bevacizumab or Avastin, the anti-VEGF or vascular endothelial growth factor drug that targets angiogenesis or blood vessel growth in cancer. And if they did not have disease progression after 4 cycles, they could go on and get maintenance with 2 of those drugs, pemetrexed and bevacizumab. And the other half of patients received the chemo drug paclitaxel, also with carboplatin and bevacizumab. Their maintenance regimen was just the bevacizumab antibody therapy by itself. Now note that this trial was limited to those patients whose lung cancers were not squamous histology. So about 30% of non-small cell lung cancer patients were not allowed to enroll in this trial, and there are 2 reasons for this. We know that pemetrexed is relatively ineffective in squamous tumors, and bevacizumab has a safety concern in those patients because of increased rates of hemoptysis or coughing up of blood. So if there's anything to take home from this discussion, it's that we're desperate for new advances in our squamous patients, because all of these drugs are targeting the non-squamous population. So when you look at the overall survival in the total study population, there is no difference between that pemetrexed arm and the paclitaxel arm, with a median overall survival of about 13 months and a p-value of 0.9. Now, the presentation at last month's ASCO really focused specifically on those patients in the trial who were able to receive maintenance therapy. And that wound up being about 2/3 of the patients who started treatment at the beginning of the study. This was a pre-specified comparison, looking at the efficacy and safety in the two maintenance groups only in the maintenance population. Now, you need to understand something about this maintenance population. It was a post-randomization population, so it was different than it was at the beginning of the trial. And these patients were not different only in the maintenance treatment that they wanted to receive, but they had just finished receiving two different induction chemotherapy regimens. So for that reason, the people conducting the study did not think that a statistical analysis was appropriate, and you're not going to see one on this next slide. So what we do see is that numerically, the overall survival in the maintenance group that got pemetrexed with bevacizumab is numerically longer than the group that started in the paclitaxel therapy, which was getting bevacizumab by itself. It's about a 2-month difference here with no statistical analysis. It's important to point out here that these numbers are very impressive. These are median overall survivals approaching 1.5 years for metastatic non-small cell lung cancer. And this is because this population does not include those patients whose disease had progressed during first-line therapy or they got too sick from toxicities. And that's why in this overall survival curve, you don't see any drop until you get past that point at around the 4 to 5 month mark. So Dr. Mark Sosinski presented a subset analysis of the Point Break trial, really looking at the question of age. And what's shown in this figure is that when you look at the younger patient population, and that was defined as either being 70 or younger or 75 or younger, numerically, survival was better with that paclitaxel regimen. When you look at the older populations, over 70 or over 75, survival is numerically better with pemetrexed. However, we can't make any conclusion from this observation because none of these analyses came close to being statistically significant. Ralph Zinner presented the related PRONOUNCE trial. So this compared the same paclitaxel, carbo, bevacizumab followed by bevacizumab regimen you saw as one of the arms in Point Break with a slightly different arm, pemetrexed carbo without bevacizumab followed by pemetrexed maintenance, again without bevacizumab. This trial had a very unusual endpoint for the primary endpoint of G4-PFS, that is progression-free survival without a patient experiencing a grade 4 toxicity. And I call this endpoint unusual because I hadn't really seen it before. It's not been validated, and it's not clear to me what the clinical significance represents. You need to understand that grade 4 toxicities are a very heterogeneous phenomenon. If a patient has grade 4 neuropathy, that patient is basically paralyzed because of that toxicity. If a patient has a grade 4 drop in platelets or a grade 4 drop in white blood cells, most of the time the patient has no symptoms whatsoever. So not all grade 4 toxicities are the same. And along those lines, in this study, less than 5% of patients with low platelet counts ever had bleeding. Less than 5% of patients who had low white blood count ever had fever or infection. In any case, while the median G4 PFS was slightly longer, 3.9 months with pemetrexed versus 2.9 months with paclitaxel, this did not reach statistical significance with a p-value of 0.17. And in terms of overall survival, we see no difference, with medians of 10.5 months with PEM, 11.7 months with paclitaxel, and a p-value of 0.6. So with the advent of bevacizumab, pemetrexed, and maintenance therapy, we have more treatment options than ever for patients with advanced non-squamous non-small cell lung cancer. However, despite the accrual of thousands of patients to large phase 3 clinical trials, the optimal approach to this disease remains unclear, and it's still not clear to me exactly what is the best induction regimen, what is the best maintenance therapy, and even our approach to subsequent therapy after that. And I think I made that pretty evident in this figure that I published last month in the Journal of Clinical Oncology. So what can we conclude from the Point Break and Pronounce trials? Well, that regimen of carboplatin, pemetrexed, bevacizumab, followed by the maintenance with pemetrexed and bevacizumab, doesn't appear to offer an efficacy or toxicity advantage over the paclitaxel regimen. We did see that the combination therapy, adding pemetrexed to bevacizumab in the maintenance setting, may further improve survival outcomes compared to monotherapy with Bev by itself, but it hasn't really been proven yet. And in that Pronounce trial, we saw that carbo-pem followed by pem maintenance, again, doesn't appear to offer an advantage over that paclitaxel regimen. I also think that G4-PFS is at best a questionable endpoint because of its clinical relevance, and that's not been validated. And so in 2013, how do we choose our drugs? Well, they do have toxicity profiles that differ. When you give prolonged pemetrexed, you need to worry about low blood counts, more so than you might with paclitaxel first line followed by bevacizumab. But you don't need to worry about alopecia and neuropathy. And finally, I think cost may play an increasing issue in the current healthcare climate. Know that either pemetrexed or bevacizumab alone, not to mention in combination, costs a fortune compared to established drugs like carboplatin and paclitaxel.
Thanks for listening. If you like and learn from our GraceCast, you can subscribe on iTunes by just searching for the term Cancer Grace, find podcasts in the subject you want, pick a format of audio or video, and then just click subscribe. It's that easy. And for those of you who don't want to miss any of our programs, there's even a feed for all subjects. You can also find us on YouTube at Grace for Cancer Info, and that's the number 4 in one word, Grace for Cancer Info. Finally, if you haven't been there yet, please check out our Grace website at www.cancergrace.org. And don't forget that donate button in the upper right. Our content, which helps tens of thousands of cancer patients around the world every month, is made possible by your support.